Everyone. This is Henda Zurayer from Product Manager HQ. I am currently interviewing product leaders to ask them about their experience, their journey into product management, so we can all learn from their experiences. And this is an opportunity for the audience to connect and also ask their questions. Today we have Joshua Solomon. Joshua is currently a senior product line manager at VMware. Joshua started his career as a software engineer and transitioned into product management. Thank you, Joshua, for your time, and thank you for coming to speak with us.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. And I understand you worked at different organizations, corporations, and startups. So the focus today is on your journey into product, and we want to talk about company culture because of your experiences with startups and corporations. So thank you so much again. And my first question for you is, can you describe how you got into product management?
Sure. So when I graduated from college, I started my professional career as a software developer. And at the time, I was unfamiliar with the role of a product manager. I'd never heard of it before, in fact. And so when I went into my professional career, software development, that was the first time that I encountered a product manager. When I showed up and my manager said, "All right, Joshua, here's what we want you to work on today. Here's your specification that you are implementing." Well, okay, that was all very well and good, and I enjoyed doing that. But eventually I got to thinking, where does this spec come from? Who writes that? That sounds like a more fun job to me than doing the implementation. I want to be the person telling the developers what to write instead of actually doing the work myself. And so, again, that was my first introduction to, oh, product managers, that's what they do. Let me learn more about this. So after this experience working with PMs in my capacity as a developer, I decided to go back to graduate school and get a master's degree and come out as a product manager. So I did exactly that. I got a master's from the School of Information in Information Management and Systems and began my career as a newly minted product manager. My first role as a PM was for a large multinational IT technology company. I worked with them for about 4.5 years. It was a really good education in both the art of product management, but also what it's like working for a large multinational IT technology corporation. I did that for about 4.5 years or so before I decided to change courses and left that role for a job with a startup, but not doing product management. Instead, I decided to move over and try product marketing for a bit. My thinking was, well, look, they're both product related roles. Product management is much more about incoming, gathering requirements, turning them into specifications, working with engineering to turn that into a product, versus product marketing, which is much more outward facing and telling the story of the product and connecting it to the value proposition and connecting with the audience that would be interested in the value that your product has. And so that was a reasonably smooth transition from product management to product marketing. The big difference on product marketing being that I work as part of a marketing team as opposed to a product or development organization. And that was pretty interesting, being the product guy on the marketing team, because marketers, they're all about managing leads for sales and sending out their email blasts and putting on their events. But all of that depends on product knowledge, which comes from the product marketer. And so I was that liaison from the product to the rest of the marketing team, allowing them to do their jobs. I did this for about another 4.5 years. And after that, that job ended. I was able to look back and say, all right, now I've done two similar but different roles, product management and product marketing. which one fits me better? Which do I like more? And the answer was, looking back at myself and what got me out of the bed, what got me out of bed was that I am a product manager at heart. And so I went back into product management. I did a PM role for a small startup for about a year and a half. I did a little bit more product marketing work as a contract role because, again, I knew I didn't want to do that full time. And then I landed the role that I'm in today, which is as a senior product line manager for VMware. And so over the course of this journey, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of really valuable learning experiences about many different aspects of the career journey, both from a role perspective, having been a software engineer, a product marketer, and a product manager, as well as from the perspective of different types of companies, large companies, smaller companies, startups, public companies, on-prem software versus software as a service, all sorts of different experiences. So it hasn't been a smooth point A to point B journey, but it's been a hell of a learning experience.
Yeah, I bet. What would you say, like, what are the learning concepts from product marketing that you still kind of like continue to think about in terms of product as a product manager? What have you learned from that role?
So being a product marketer, the core responsibility when it comes down to it is being responsible for the messaging and value proposition of your product. And of course, you need to be very tied into product development. And as a product marketer, a product manager is your best friend because you really need to be well clued into what features are coming and why, and what markets are we trying to address, and how did we make those decisions? Because all of that input goes into what the PM does and building out a product backlog and working on turning requirements into actual features in a product. But then from the product marketing side, you take that story and you tell it. You draw the connections between what your product does and the needs and problems faced by your potential users out there in the marketplace. Because really, nobody buys a product for its features. Nobody buys, a computer because it has X amount of memory. No, they buy products because of what they can do with them, what the products can do for them. So in the case of a computer, I'm not buying it because it has a lot of memory. I'm buying it because I want to run software that maybe has requirements for a lot of memory. And so just like that, as a product marketer in my role, I needed to translate from here are the features of this product to here is how this product will make your life better. And that is really what product marketing boils down to. And then, of course, the rest of the people in the marketing team take those value proposition statements and turn them into the email blasts and turn them into the event marketing events, etc. One really key piece of the puzzle for me, though, as I was going through the process of figuring out what I wanted to do with my career, was the notion that product marketing is storytelling. And that's definitely a good thing if you are a good storyteller. And I think I am. But the thing is, as a product marketer, you're not really writing the story. You're telling a story that the PM is writing because it's the PM who's making the decisions on what your product should be doing and what features you're prioritizing and who you're building the product for. As the product marketer, you're just telling the story. And so from my point of view, although I do like telling a story, I like writing the story more. And so that desire for that sense of ownership of the product and what it does, and the feeling of, the buck kind of stops with me. It stops with product management on, have you correctly understood the customer problem, and are you building something that will solve it? And that sense of ownership of the problem is what drew me back to product management.
Got it. And just for individuals who want to understand like the storytelling technique, can you go through just maybe like briefly how you go about presenting in a storytelling format? Because from what I understand, you're presenting to a lot of stakeholders as a product manager.
Absolutely. Probably one of the biggest, most useful skills that I've had to develop that really hadn't occurred to me at the earlier portions of my career was the importance of public speaking and the ability to present and communicate and get ideas across, and to be able to adjust your story for your audience. You're not going to tell the same story in the same way to a room of C-level executives as you would to a room of hands-on software developers. Obviously, you're going to have different messages. And so that ability to communicate a message, again, that's one of the things I think distinguishes a mediocre product manager from a really successful one. It's that ability to tell a story, to get ideas across, to win people over to your side, to get stakeholders who are coming from a huge variety of different places, all to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish and why, and to get on board. That's what being a good product manager means. And without that ability to get alignment, to get agreement among people who do not report to you, who in fact may well be senior to you, I mean, that's how you succeed as a PM.
Nice. And we want to talk a little bit more about culture, company culture, because you've worked at larger organizations and startups. Can you describe some of the differences that you've experienced between maybe working for a larger corporation versus a startup?
Certainly, larger corporations, by their nature, are going to have more process and more bureaucracy. And bureaucracy sounds like a bad word, it kind of is, but there's reasons for that process, and it can be harnessed for good. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. By the time you reach the scale of a VMware or other equivalent large corporations, there's so many moving parts and so many different stakeholders that need to be a part of the process, that without some level of enforced process, things just fall apart. And to succeed at a larger company, you have to be okay with that. You have to understand how the process requirements are meant to help you and ideally not constrain you. And if they do constrain you, a good organization will take that feedback and allow you to modify the process in a way that it becomes less of a constraint. And frankly, that's one differentiator between a good large company and a less good one, is its self-awareness about, this is what we've had to do in order to get to where we are now, but we need to take periodic looks at ourselves and say, does this still make sense? Is what we did to get here still what we need to be doing at this point? And again, better companies with better cultures will be constantly evaluating themselves to see if what worked up until that point is what they should still be doing or not, and not just continuing to operate in the status quo because that's how they've always worked. Smaller companies, in contrast, are much less process heavy, and by and large, they're much less people and resource heavy. And consequently, whereas in larger companies, your role probably is going to be more well defined and structured, and you'll probably have better guardrails around what it is that you'll be asked to do. Smaller companies, startups in particular, are going to be all over the place. And you really need to be prepared to be a jack of all trades. Like, what needs doing today? All right, well, that's what my job is today. And, as a PM in a smaller company, I mean, sure, you're still responsible for core PM functions, but you may well be asked to do some marketing some days, and you may be asked to get on sales calls, and you may be asked to jump in to do some QA and wherever the need is that day, because again, startups by their very nature are resource short and trying to do everything they can to develop their market traction so that they can get to a point of scaling up and expanding. And it's just getting to that point that you have to help with.
Do you think someone needs like some level of introspective, what are my likes, what are my dislikes, and before they select a company in order to get a right fit for culture?
So rather than thinking of likes and dislikes, what I would say, some key criteria to keep in mind about a company as you might be evaluating it for if you want to apply or if you want to accept an offer. Things like, how focused is the company on employee development? I say this from a point of view of having worked for companies that both paid very little attention to employee development and those who have given a lot more attention to it. And obviously, the latter are a lot better places to be because they are much more invested in your career, in wanting to keep you around because as you continue to develop skills, you become potentially more valuable. You can take on new and potentially more elevated roles. Versus, again, a company that doesn't really care and doesn't help you develop, well, then either you're going to be doing the same thing indefinitely or you're going to leave. So, keep that in mind when evaluating how much the company cares about the development of its staff. Another piece that I found, again, by lessons learned over the course of my career, is to pay attention to the level of communication internally among a company. And again, examples that I've lived of not so good communication are ones in which my day-to-day job as a PM, I didn't have much of any sense how it connected to the broader company goals. Like, I knew what my day and my week and what my very localized objectives were, but I didn't know how those connected to the product, much less the overall corporate strategy. And that made it really hard to do anything other than be super localized, and was not really a path to grow. It was not a path to being able to expand my influence because I didn't know what that broader influence would even look like, because that was not shared with the lowly hands-on PM. In contrast, better companies have much clearer and more open lines of communication from the top all the way down. And so best-in-class companies make super clear what their mission statement is and what their objectives are and what their goals are and what their KPIs are. And that should be very clearly relatable to the goals and objectives and KPIs of your organization, which should be very clearly relatable to the goals of your team, which should be very clearly relatable to your own personal goals. And again, at the best companies, that really gives you that integrated picture of, oh, I understand how what I'm doing today advances the mission for the company writ large. And, it's a much better feeling than one of isolation and having no idea how what you're doing connects to anything.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's very important to align yourself with the company's values and mission. Um, there is a question that I will save until the last question that I have. I will make room for Q&A. Um, and this will be my last question. Then we'll go to the Q&A. What advice would you give individuals when selecting what companies to work for?
Well, I would be very clear with yourself about what it is that you prioritize in a job. Is it the type of product that you're working on, as in, like, oh, I love IoT and I only want to work for an Internet of Things company and don't care about anything else? Or is it the responsibilities that you have? You know, pure PM versus more product marketing or more product ownership. You should for sure keep in mind the overall company and its culture. I talked in the last question about two important facets of the culture, both the attention the company pays to employee development, as well as the internal lines of communication. I mean, you want to be at a place where you feel valued, you feel like you are a part of the team, you feel like you are contributing to what the company's trying to accomplish, where you can be recognized and acknowledged for your contributions. And so that's an important piece of the puzzle too. And so, I wish you and everyone who's watching it the having multiple offers and having being in the situation of having to choose between them. If you're in a situation like that, then hopefully this gives you a framework of how to compare them and how to identify areas in which one role might be a better fit than the other.
Yeah, I just want to read this comment and question. As you touched upon, the process sometimes takes time, so we need to paddle through. So how do PMs plan as it might affect product launch dates?
Product launches are a entire area unto themselves. And so let me actually tell you a story, because I have been involved in a product launch that went live today. And that date, unfortunately, slipped several times over the course of this particular release schedule. And part of my role as the PM responsible for this release was to make decisions on whether a given bug, a given issue that was identified in the last minute QA testing, was that worth slipping the release for? Or should we defer the bug to a later release? How serious is the bug? Who's going to be affected? So these sorts of last minute decisions on what you should do with a release, those again fall right into the product manager's roles and responsibility of making those tough calls. What happens if we release the product and it has this bug in it? How bad is that? What are the potential downsides? Who's going to be affected? If we decide to slip the release so we fix the bug, what are the downsides there? Who are the people who should weigh in on this decision? And frequently as a PM, I don't necessarily know the details of this particular bug, and it may be way in the weeds. And particularly, again, at a larger company, which is where I work now, the product I work on has, oh gosh, probably about 25 PMs and more, depending on how you count them. But it's quite likely that any given bug that pops up will be in someone else's area of knowledge and responsibility. And so part of my job is coming up to speed very quickly and getting a sense of what this other area is that I may not have had previous exposure to, but then also knowing where my limits lie and knowing where I should say, okay, I do not know the right answer. I need to talk to a subject matter expert on this, and we need to wait to get that input, because me making a wild guess is not going to be in the best interest of this decision.
Thank you for that answer. Another question. Can you touch upon or give any give an overview what skills I need to acquire to become machine learning, artificial intelligence PM roles?
So machine learning and artificial intelligence are super hot areas of activity and hiring and product work these days. There's a couple of different aspects to that. One is actual products where that is the product. You are building a machine learning or an AI product. And I mean, that really requires some knowledge, I think, of data science, of how AI models are trained, and also to have a sense of where AI and machine learning are valuable and where they can add value to a product. The other spin on a PM as it relates to AI and machine learning is a non-AI product, but one that somehow can leverage that for decision making. And the product that I work on is probably a good example of that second category. It's not an AI or ML product in and of itself, but we do collect a lot of valuable data on how our users use the product. And that can be pretty valuable to us in decision making, and also in thinking about how we can add features that may be self-learning. And so I guess that sort of blurs that boundary that I was just drawing a moment ago. But if you have large data sets, and even if you are not an AI product per se, you can still add aspects of that into products in all sorts of different ways just to make them smarter and to make them be able to adapt to their users. And that seems to be a pretty widespread expectation of users today, I think, is products should learn, products should adjust to their users, and over time provide them with more personalized, more individualized service for whatever that product does. And so I think you'll see over time even non-AI products eventually incorporate more and more of these aspects. So that distinction that I drew at the beginning of this question, I think will eventually blur and go away.
Perfect. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to enter in the chat box. I have one question for you, Joshua. How would someone starting product management without a technical background compensate for that background?
Having a technical background is certainly valuable, but is not a must-have. I have known and worked with multiple PMs who have not come from a technical background, even though I myself did. And so working with them and learning from them, what I would say is you need a bare minimum of technical competency. I mean, you don't necessarily need to be a hardcore Java developer, but you at least need to be able to speak intelligently with engineers so that when you're writing specifications for them, they're coming back with questions, they're pointing out potential problems and architectures, that you can have an intelligent conversation with them. So you need to have at least something. But beyond that, there's a whole bunch of other skills that PMs could bring to the table. So some PMs bring a focus or expertise in user experience or user interface design. And that can be really valuable if you are dealing with interfaces and customer-facing products and what that experience is like for your users. There's PMs who come with really a business-focused background. Some people come right from business school, though not, some people also come from undergraduate business degrees. And those PMs tend to be really good at understanding the market, understanding the potential market and addressable markets, understanding pricing and packaging, which are all very important aspects of owning and managing a product. Other product Specializations could be data science. People come into PM with data science backgrounds. Again, that makes for a pretty unique and valuable set of skills for performing the PM role, even if you don't have a Java development background coming into the role.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time and discussing company culture, your experience in product, and all the advice. Uh, we really appreciate you having you on, and look forward to you coming on again if you ever want to come back. So thank you so much, Joshua. For those who want to connect with Joshua, Joshua is connected on our LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to him. I'm sorry, Joshua. Do you have one more room for one more question?
Sure.
Uh, the this last question: as a new PM, should the day-to-day focus be on their strengths, skills to pass probation?
As a new PM, I think the most important focus is to learn how to be a PM. And so when you say focusing on strengths and skills, I mean, of course, the way that you get better is by understanding what you do well and then doing more of that. But really specifically as a new PM, where I think it makes sense is to understand your users, to understand your product, to understand the connection between them. You know, what is the problem that your users have that your product is solving and how, and to get a sense of the forward-looking plan for given this set of users with these problems and this product or product platform in which to solve those problems, what are the next steps? And that way you can start providing value to your organization. You know, as a new PM, reporting up to your manager, like here's an observation that I've noticed about our users and our backlog, and I think that if we advance this particular feature, did that next, that would solve this problem. That would be good for our users in this way. So it's really all about that depth of understanding of product and user and market. And that will then give you the scaffolding to start adding value with your core PM skills.
Wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Joshua. I really appreciate you answering that one last question that came to us very last minute. Appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Feel free to connect on our LinkedIn page to be updated on our latest events, and see you soon. Thank you, Joshua.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.